Oh, welcome to another episode of Real Talk. I am Devon Wieters, and today we have Lynette Louise, aka the Brain Broad, with us. How are you today, Lynette?
I'm really good. It's actually really beautiful out. I don't know where you are, but where I am, it is a gorgeous day.
Yes, it is nice and sunny in Virginia, and I have to study for a rhetoric final, so I'm not enjoying any of it.
Well, even knowing that the sun is out and it's shining can help your mood.
Yes.
Actually, that's true. That's true. Because your brain gives you the experience of what you tell it, right? So if you say, "Wow, it's a sunny day, fantastic," then you'll feel better until you say, "But I'm studying for finals, so I don't get to enjoy any of it." So leave that part out.
Yes. See, we're getting tidbits already. Uh, uh, and so tell us about a little bit about yourself and your story, Louise.
Okay. It's a funny thing to be doing a lot of podcasts and always talking about yourself and what's already happened. Um, and you get a little bored of yourself, really, to tell you the truth. So I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version. I come from a me to want to save children, protect them, make it so that they didn't have that kind of experience themselves. In that process, as I got older, I had a couple of children. I would have just kept having babies, I think, because it's easier than adopting, much easier. But especially for me, because I give birth really quickly and well. But I unfortunately couldn't have any more children after my son died at birth. And so I started looking into adoption. And when I did that, I discovered there were all these children that weren't getting homes. And I sort of got a soft heart for the idea of really helping somebody that maybe wouldn't have otherwise been adopted. So the end of that story is that I ended up with 8 children, 6 adopted, 4 multiply handicapped, 5 challenged, and only one is still dependent and at home. They were on the autism spectrum, had Tourette's syndrome, had child abuse, neglect, malnutrition, different things that happened to them, as well as what they were born with. So it was a miracle, really, to be able to help each and every one of them more than they had ever anticipated. I did that by, you know, um, because of, hey, can you do that with my kids? In fact, I have a person staying here from Lebanon whose parents kind of said that. They're like, can you help with them, please? So it just became what I did. I started going everywhere and helping other people to sort of try, at least, to recreate what I had done. I used neurofeedback and play, and work all over the world, highly successful. And I eventually got a doctorate just because I wanted to be more heard by the professionals in the field. So that's kind of me. Ta-da!
What is your doctorate in exactly? Not that you needed the piece of paper saying you were an expert in it, but what does the piece of paper say?
You know what? That's a really good question because I'm a doctor of science, bioscience. It's not beneficial in any way other than being able to say that when you get introduced on a show or a speaking engagement. And that's the honest truth. I also got a PhD, all but dissertation, in psychophysiology, psychology with a specialty in psychophysiology. So it sounds really fancy and impressive. Um, One's an accredited college, one isn't. Like, there's a real eclectic mix once you start looking. But really and truly, the learning happened in the doing. And I think this is a problem in our society because we honor so much and value so much what people do at school, when in reality we're having them do that so that they will do better in their lives. And the real learning happened in the doing. Absolutely.
Yeah, rhetoric right now. I'm hoping to do a podcast with my rhetoric professor when this is all over because he's a fascinating dude. And there's this thing called the banking system of education, and basically what it is, and the business model of education, and basically what it is the idea that education is just a bunch of factoids that you memorize and spew out when you need it, and
Right.
not let the information change you human in the classroom, just be factoid dispensing machines. So
Right.
that is exactly what we're learning, some of what we're learning about in rhetoric. So I'm glad you said
Right. And it's truly counter to education, because when you think about a little baby who develops their frontal lobe because or begins to develop their frontal lobe because they're solving problems. When you think about that and then you put it against us saying, stop solving problems, let us put information in, you realize you're actually asking them to shut off the most important part of the brain. In regard, all parts of the brain are important, but in regards to executive function, of handling social skills, of being engaged in the world and being successful, you need good frontal lobes. And we actually prevent a greater development by not encouraging problem solving. So it's a huge issue. Here's a question. So you're at school, you're going to college, and your teachers are giving you information, right?
yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. How do you know what they're telling you is right?
Well,
Okay. Exactly. You just have to believe, right?
yes.
All right, here's the problem with being a mature student who already did all the work. So I was in college at the end just to sort of get some kind of credibility for what I'd already accomplished. And half the time, they were telling me stuff that was wrong, that I'd already discovered when working with my children, that if I did what I was told to do, they wouldn't develop. So I had already, with my own children, changed how that was done. So here I am later in college being told facts that I know are incorrect. And that left me with a quandary that I'd like to share. Since that was true in the areas where I knew what worked, how am I to disseminate whether something is correct or not? So in the areas where they were telling me something I'd never learned already, I just believed them because I didn't have any countering information.
And that like, I promise you, I'm not doing this to impress my rhetoric professor. I mean, I'll share this podcast with him because it's become a rhetoric lesson all of a sudden. But can you hear me?
You know what? It's cutting out a lot. I'm hoping that they're repairing in my ears.
Hold on. Is that better?
Much. Yay, people, you'll like it better.
Okay. Anyway, I'm not doing this to impress my rhetoric professor or anything, but I will share this podcast with him tomorrow because I'm going to do a test review on Saturday. But and we are learning about this other thing called occupational psychosis, and basically what it is that we're blind to the fact that we're blind, and we're so attached to the way that we see things that we don't even know, like, we're blind to the things that we don't see, and that kind of, like, reminded me of that. Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, that's a necessary bias of the brain, right?
Yes.
For us to evolve, we have to embrace beliefs, build upon that. But it's very problematic when we're wrong.
yes.
So it's like ideas or other concepts, or even you're actually physically blind too. They have lots of good optical illusions that prove that stuff out, where, I remember watching a neat trick. I think it was a BBC special, but at any rate, there's this guy in a monkey suit that dances across the stage amongst all these women who are dancing. But because of the words being shared by the MC, nobody saw him. He literally was right there. He didn't hide in any way. But they didn't see him because he didn't fit in what was being told and what was being shown with the other dancers. They literally just didn't see him. And that's what happens to us. We become blind in every respect. Yeah.
Yeah, and one more rhetoric thing, and then we'll get to the other questions.
Sure.
We're also learning about, like, social movements and how they're successful. And the first thing you have to do with the social movement is attack the language that people think in. And so that kind of reminded, what you said kind of reminded me of that too.
Attack the language or use the language?
Or like, not confront the language. I think attack is
Right.
a strong word. But
No, I like it. And use it. As you can't just throw dynamite at a problem, especially when it comes to a problem where the brain's going to lock down hard and say, no, absolutely, you're wrong. You'll just create two fights, right? So if you use their language a little bit, then some of their defense mechanism drops and they're able to hear you. And then you put your concept in. And then at the end of that, explain why the language should shift. So it's a process to hearing you, and you use their language for that. That makes sense?
That's a good point.
Okay.
So on to the other questions, I guess. Tell me about how you came across this boy from Lebanon.
Well, as I explained in my backstory, I travel all over the world, and I originally worked with his cousin in France, and then they said, hey, good things happened, do you want to check her out? And that's pretty much, word of mouth is pretty much how I've done all my business. It's a lot cheaper for advertising if you do such good work that people talk about you. And in fact, that was my decision. I decided early in, I said, I'm just going to be so spectacular, I won't have to work hard at getting work. And it's just kept me motivated to not get lazy, but to always be really on my game and really making a difference. So people just talk about me in chat rooms and things like that, or they share with their friends. And that's how I met him. And I worked with their family for several years, but some real changes had to happen and they needed hands-on for that. So that's how I met him, and that's how he ended up staying here. He's going to be here for about 3 months.
That's so cool. And like, what changes have you seen in him already?
Well, that's a great question. He's only been here 11 days. And already his demeanor is much different. His desire for independence has grown. He's more comfortable in his own skin. He was having meltdowns and things there. He hasn't had a single one here. He's happier. He's more able to be cooperative because I'm asking for less steps, but I'm asking for cooperation. So that's a really good bit of advice for people. I call it do less for success. And I'll give you an example. Somebody that has a problem wearing socks, they really don't need to. They don't have to wear socks. Somebody that has a problem fastening or tying their shoes, don't buy shoes that need to be tied. So the first thing you do is you do less for success. You say, what's important for this person? What's interesting to them? Does the bed need to be made perfectly? Or is it okay if it's a sort of a jumble of covers? And once you do that, they feel freer and more comfortable. And that's the case here.
That's a really good tip, honestly.
Good.
And how did you learn all this knowledge and how to work with this?
Well, part of it's intuitive, I think, because of coming from a challenged home where there was a fair amount of abuse. I had to pay attention to what worked for me and what felt right and how things affected me to not go crazy in it. So I was paying attention to behavior long before I ever graduated grade 2. So I think there was like a training ground in that. And then at least I chose to make it one. And I had a little Asperger's myself, so I was a literal thinker, and I had some stuff going on that made it that later when I ran into that seemed kind of normal, being too blunt, things like that. So there was that sort of setup of my life. And then additionally, I was lucky, I adopted it. So since I adopted people that had challenges, I was able to not have the guilt that a natural parent does. A lot of times when a parent has a special needs child, they feel guilty. They ate when they were pregnant, that, whatever. These boys had fetal alcohol syndrome, so, the glass of wine you had at the wrong time, that guilt gets in the way of you really seeing the child and really helping them. And I didn't have that guilt. So I was able to look at them as who they are. I took them the way they were. They didn't ever disappoint me because that's how they were when I got them. So I was able to embrace that. And from there, and that's already big, by the way, that's a huge changer. And from there, I was also able, because they were my children, to do what worked, not what I was told. And I was often doing what the schools said to do and seeing negative results, and then stopping and reinventing what looked like the right idea. And I based all that on my childhood. So it's not really copyable, my situation. It's very unique to me. But the lessons I've learned are shareable. It's a great gift, actually, to be able to pass that on. And that's why I write books and do speaking and all that stuff.
And tell me a little bit about how you got, quote unquote, diagnosed with Asperger's, because I think that's a fascinating story. Yeah. Actually, that was, I guess you could call it historical, because it was over my history. So what happened was I was already doing really well with the children, and my kids had already become independent, better than independent. One's a helicopter mechanic, another one's a welder. I mean, they've done well. They're, married with kids or getting married, but, it's things like that. And, yeah, so I was doing so well and having so much difficulty really getting the concepts across to other people. And I thought, I wonder if that's something special about me. And my mom had always said, it wasn't her that was crazy, it was me. So that always kind of rung in my head. And I thought, well, let's find out. And I went to a psychiatrist and I said, I'd like to just tell you my story, and then you tell me if it's just abuse or if there's more going on. So I went and saw her 5 times. I told her the different things of my life, the different things of my sensory system and stuff. And yeah, so at the end, before making a final diagnosis, she sent me an email. And to understand, we call each other odd ducks. It was just something that had transpired. So I call her the odd duck and she calls me the oddest duck, or the other way around. I never can remember. So anyway, at the end of this 5 visits, she sends me an email and she says, well, I researched trying to figure out what you had. And I found an old medical book that had something that in it that fits you perfectly that I haven't read about in years. So you have adductoralis. And so most people would have gone, ha, ha, ha. But I went, I wonder what that is. Adductor, to find this disorder. And really, she was making mind was still a little bit too literal. And so I was literally trying to find out what adductoralis was. And when I finally gave up and I said, okay, I can't find it, what the heck is that? She said, okay, it's official. You have Asperger's. That is hilarious. I'm sorry. Oh my gosh. That is hilarious.
Now, there's no such thing now as Asperger's. They don't call it that anymore. They call it high functioning autism, but it's still, it's the same thing, whatever you call it. A rose is still a rose by whatever name.
That is funny.
Yeah, I think so too.
That is like one of the weirdest diagnosis stories I've ever heard on this podcast. So is there anything else that people can check out?
Well, I think let's honor the month that we're visiting in. It's Autism Awareness Month, and it's also Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And I've written on both the subject of abuse and the subject of autism. So actually my autism book is right here. I'll show it to you. So it's called Miracles Are Made, A Real Life Guide to Autism. I call it that because, yeah, they were miracles, but they were made. It was hard work. So you got it made out of elbow grease and determination. So miracles are often that sometimes you can see the work done and sometimes you can't. When you can't see the work done because it happens quickly, we call it a spiritual miracle or something, but you have to work for it. So I tell the story of, my children and my situation, and then I also do case studies in there, and I also give some brain advice. So it's a nice mixture, a nice broad-based book. It also gives some history on why you might be misinformed about autism, and it busts some myths. So I think it's very useful. The abuse-related book is brand new. It's just out, and it's called Sever the Cycle of Abuse with the Sub Shop Savior. It's a picture storybook. It's a perfect gift to give someone who's having trouble getting out of a situation or getting over it. They've been out of it for a long time and they can't get over it, or they were traumatized by a rape or something. It's a great gift because it's a picture book. It's a story. It's a true story. It's my story, but it's my discovery of how to let go, and I take you with me on that journey. And it's nice and short and easier to read, and less triggers, but still useful. So I invite you to get both of those, and also to know that if your child has autism and is minimally verbal or nonverbal, there's a high incidence of sexual assault in that group of individuals. And not to think in terms of, oh, nobody would because they're special. It's just the opposite. So you want to be a little bit alert and just know who's with your child and what's happening as much as possible. It's an important point for, especially this month, we're paying attention to both those subjects.
And what are the signs that parents can look for about if their kid has been assaulted? Or
I'm going to have to ask you to repeat that because it cut out.
Okay. What are the signs that parents can look for if their kid's been assaulted or abused?
It's a good question. Well, we're talking about children with, in this case, with minimal verbal skills or no verbal skills. Often you'll see a change in bowel or bladder behavior. So somebody that was fully trained just stands there and pees, or starts pooing incorrectly or on themselves or something. If it's out of the blue, there's something to look into. Could be illness too. It isn't necessarily this, but it's a good sign that something has gone wrong in the genital area. It's worth a look. A look into their situation. That's one of the most telling things, but you'll also see just behavioral change. Someone who is hyper becomes, placid and hiding. Someone who was placid and hiding becomes angry. It's like a flip of behavior. And then, of course, you want to not let other people give you stories about what happened to them. And if you have a child that's not trained, for example, and suddenly is getting diaper rash, this is true of little children too. But, the caregivers are saying, well, this and this and this. Well, okay, once or twice. But if it's really happening and it never used to, there's something to look into. It's just the typical stuff, actually.
Okay. And is there anything you would like to add before we get off of here?
Well, we definitely don't want to end on a down note like that. So I want to end on something more positive.
Yeah, that's why I said, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah. At the end of the day, every child I've helped, that it's been tangible, the amount of help that I've given, it's really just come from listening and responding to their actual wishes and needs. Not listening and responding to the training that everybody else is giving you. You use that as a filler, as a way of getting more knowledge so that you'll be better at listening and responding to your child. But your child already knows what they need, even when they don't have language. They're trying to tell you. If you get all bent out of shape worrying that you don't understand, you won't take action. So guess. The most freeing thing I ever learned was when you don't know, guess. And the reason for that is because when you don't guess, when you're afraid of making a mistake and you won't guess, you stay stuck. And so you do nothing, and your child grows another year older and another year older and another year older. No, guess. just guess. If you're wrong, you'll know real quick, and then you'll do the other thing. But if you just stand there, your child will grow and grow and grow and not change enough and not blossom. You have a chance to help. So guess.
That's really good. And one more thing that I forgot to ask you about. You did an audiobook on cerebral palsy. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I did. Well, that's also a true story. So my intention is to have 3 picture books, Maker, and they're all true stories. And the reason I want this 3 picture book presentation is it's more creative, and it reaches the eyes and ears of people that wouldn't normally have maybe paid attention. You know, they look kind of like a manga or a children's storybook, but they are much deeper than that. So that was kind of the reason for the style. But I want to tell you a quick story. So I was walking with my son, who is highly special and very obviously so, and I was walking behind him, and the man in the grocery store turned to him and didn't know he was with me and said, "Your mama should have put you down the day you were born."
Oh my, okay.
Exactly. And so, of course, I'm so angry and so hurt, but my son is right there. And so you're torn. You have to figure out what's the right way to respond. And, and this story is kind of fun for me because once I got over the shock, I chased him around in the aisles of the store, found him with his wife. And when he was standing with his wife, I'm like, just can you please explain to your husband that my son understands everything he says? So when he said, right? So she was so mad at him. And I thought, she'll take care of him. But it raised a question for me. And, a lot of questions, and I had to help my son and everything. But the big question was those moms out there that have children that present as so special, but that are so wonderful to us, that we love so much. They deal with this all the time. And how can I help that situation? How can I tell a story that will reach the hearts and minds of someone who wouldn't have read it otherwise? And I needed it to not be my story with my son. I wanted it to have more of an ending,
I'm not going to get too much into it, but there's a serious problem because I've dealt with people making ignorant comments on more than one occasion, and they just see a chair and they assume all this stuff, and it's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, I can grasp a little of what you said, and again, it's cutting out. But yeah, I'm sure you've dealt with your own share of this problem.
Yeah. Sorry for the cutouts today, y'all. I don't know what is going on with this audio, but we will make do with what we have. Sorry, this is gonna be.
Sorry.
This may not be the best audio quality podcast, but it's a lot of good info, so bear with us. And so, is there any final thought you would like to add before we get out of here?
Yeah, maybe. What came to mind was, we're all going to die. We all have the same ending. So the part that we can control is the part in the middle. We can't control how we were born, and we can't control how we end. But we can control the way we embrace life. And so I think it doesn't matter if you're dealing with cerebral palsy, if you're dealing with autism, if you're dealing with trauma. If instead of thinking, this is my plight, you think, what's a great thing I can do today? Or you wake up every morning, what's the most fun I can have with this day? Ask the kind of questions of yourself and about your loved ones that lead you to have a happy life, because it's actually your job and no one else's.
Mic dropped. Okay. Alright, so I guess we'll end it there on that note. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Twitter at Devon Real Talk, Instagram at Real Talk Podcast Official. And where can they follow you, Louise?
Well, my name is Lynette. Louise is my surname. And it's okay. You can follow me everywhere. You can go to LynetteLouise.com. You can go to BrainBroad.com. You can go Twitter, Facebook. And if you put Brain Broad in the search engine, you're going to find me. There isn't another one.
Okay, I'll put all those links to the books and stuff you mentioned in the show notes as well. So,
all right.
So, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'm sorry if it's not the best audio quality. I've been having major internet troubles and audio troubles, as you know, and hopefully that'll be fixed soon.
Okay.
So I will see you guys next time. Bye.